Hi and welcome everyone to this episode that today is going to be all about journaling with the inner critic. And we are going to talk about the inner critic and what exactly it is or how we perceive it in a moment. But I guess you all know these inner critical voices, critical thoughts running through your head that tell you to keep pushing, that you are not enough, that you should do better, all this BS that the critic is telling us. And if you are a woman or a person who bleeds, then there are two distinct phases in your cycle that where you are more prone to experiencing this criticism from the inner critic or the critical thoughts. And in case you have a menstrual cycle, that would be the time pre-ovulation and the time post-ovulation. So this inner spring and inner autumn phase. And if you don't have a menstrual cycle for any reason, you cycle with the moon, and then it would be either the waxing moon phase or the waning moon phase, where the critical thoughts might show up more than in other phases, which is because in inner spring, we are very connected to our inner child, to this innocence and playfulness, and especially if we have had traumatic experiences during our childhood, then a lot can come up during that phase. And again, during the inner autumn phase, it's our truth speaking time. So all these areas where we might not be aligned with our truth right now and live our truth, they might show up just to remind us, hey, there is something that isn't working for you, so please have a look at this. And because journaling has been a big support in my own life through my own dark night of the soul, and I use it quite often, especially when these thoughts kick in, I have invited a friend and journaling expert, Roshnii Rose, today, who will support us and guide us through some exercises she has devised in how we can get in touch with this inner critic and maybe even start befriending the inner critic. So welcome, Roshnii. Good to have you here. And if you would like to present yourself and introduce yourself to the listeners and watchers.
Thanks, Lisa. Thanks for inviting me. Yeah, I'm Roshnii, and I've been a lifelong journal keeper, and I now run workshops and courses to support people to integrate journaling into their own lives as a tool for personal development, for supporting the creative process, and also for finding ways of managing the different areas of their life. So yeah, using journaling in many ways. I'm also a mother, and that's been a very big part of my journey in the last 15 years.
Wow. Yes. So you have devised a way to get in touch with your inner critic and to support others doing the same. What would you say? What is the inner critic? How does it show up? How does it affect us? Just so that we have a sense of what this is all about.
Yeah, it's a good question, and I won't say that I have a definitive answer, because I think it's well, the inner critic shows up differently for every individual based on, their personality, their life experiences, and there's some theories from the world of psychology as to what the inner critic is. There's a thought that it is somehow an aggregation of all the negative messages or kind of limiting beliefs that we've taken on from different people in our lives, perhaps figures of authority. And there's also the idea that the inner critic has evolved from a more primordial aspect of the brain that is needed to keep us safe, needed to keep us safe in our family and community environments. And so but because of our, what I think, because of the complexities of our modern mind, the inner critic is kind of often gets out of control. It's like, it's here to keep me safe, but it's giving me all these messages that I'm not enough, or I'm the things I do are not to a high enough standard. It wants me to stand out, but it doesn't want me to be noticed. It's become so complex, and there's so many layers to it that psychology aside, I think it's really about finding ways that work for each of us to manage our relationship with those critical thoughts, and to find the tools that really support us to find a balance where we can take the helpful side of those thoughts, because they can often have a grounding in constructive wisdom, but to work with them in a way that is going to be supportive and not a means of self-sabotage, which can often be the result if the critical voices gain too much traction, and are given too much time in the driver's seat.
And I love that you stress that it is a relationship. It's about, as you say, managing the relationship, because everything in life boils down to relationships. The relationship to our body, the relationship to time, the relationship to other people, the relationship to self, and to these inner critical voices. Very true. And I just want to add something, because I have heard of the inner critic as a concept, and it's, as you say, an amalgamation of different thoughts and negative messages, or criticizing, judging messages. And I personally have taken by now more to the approach of looking at the thoughts, and that's why I usually call it my inner critical thoughts, because for me this means I have it's just a thought. It's not something that's mean in itself. It wants to protect me. This thought has kept me alive to this day, but it's not serving me to be fulfilled and happy as I want to be, and design my life in a way that I feel called to. And so when I think about thoughts, I know that while I cannot change every thought that's popping into my head, when I realize a thought popping into my head, I can say, oh, that's not a thought I want to think. Let me consciously for a moment think a different thought. And this is not to say or to dismiss this concept of the inner critic, because different people have different ways of dealing with this. And everybody experiences it. And some need to call it the inner critic, and others might just find it more helpful to think about, okay, how can I manage these thoughts? That's why I wanted to present this different aspect. And I think there might be many, many more ways of dealing with this inner criticism that we have taken on from childhood. So I'm really glad that you pointed that out.
Yeah, I think there are multiple ways to look at it. And even one person might, in a moment, be in such a place that they can see that's a thought, they have enough perspective and clarity to see, okay, that's a thought. I don't need to go with it. I can choose a different pathway of thinking in this moment. I also have seen in myself how when I'm in a vulnerable place or a place of overwhelm, or often it's related to overwhelm, actually, those thoughts become so big and so kind of aggressive almost, that the part of me that might, in another moment of feeling more centered, be able to dismiss them and not give importance to them, has been under attack, and before I know it, I'm just like drowning in this sort of the critical voices. So that's why having tools which enable us to impose some objectivity, even in times when it might not come so easily, can be useful, to work around those moments when we might feel vulnerable or on the back foot.
Absolutely. And even just having this inner critic as a kind of personified concept can be super helpful when you want to start a relationship, because you cannot start a relationship with like every thought that's running through your head. We have 60,000 thoughts a day. But having this inner critic as something you can then start going into a dialogue with, and we will touch on that in a little bit, can be super helpful. So you have devised a way for you and for your clients to starting this relationship and finding this place of objectivity. Would you maybe like to share a little bit about that process?
So today I will share 2 exercises which I'll go on to describe shortly. And in addition to those, I work with a series of exercises where we use different journaling techniques to develop empathy, essentially, for the inner critic. And we do use it in this sense of personifying the inner critic as an entity of its own, if you like. I mean, always acknowledging that it's a part of ourselves, but just in order to create this sense of relationship. So through these exercises, we explore the story behind the inner critic, like its life story, if you like, and also how you might envision it. And it's interesting how this brings this sense of what can begin as quite an antagonistic, almost fearful relationship with the inner critic gets transformed into something much more loving and empathic, as I said, and also brings a lightness and a sense of humor to what can be quite a troubling relationship that people are having with this inner self aspect of the self. So, and those exercises lead up to a journal dialogue that we write together when I'm workshopping around this. But for the purpose of today, I wanted to offer 2 kind of preliminary exercises, which focus first, actually not on the inner critic itself, but on developing a sense of one's grounded adult self. So my reason for this is that whenever we engage with the inner critic, it really helps to enter into that engagement from a grounded, centered place, so that you can assert the boundaries that you require, so that you can communicate clearly, so that you have a sense of the sense of, what's okay and what's not okay, but also of the nuances and the the shades of gray when working with the critic, because our adult self is able to see, the full panorama of the story, rather than seeing things very black and white, which the child self is more inclined to do. So the first exercise focuses on imagining, and again, we do this from a kind of outside perspective, like imagining what your grounded adult self looks like, how it feels to be in her presence, how the energy that she generates, the qualities that she embodies. And through doing that written kind of portrait, we call it, so I call it a character sketch. It's like you're writing a written portrait of this character or this persona. you can gain a deeper sense of all the qualities that aspect of yourself represents, and then it can be easier to invoke that part of yourself, or then kind of internalize her for the purposes of going into the second exercise, which is about writing what we call an unsent letter. So it's a letter form, but you have no intention of sending it, but writing a letter to the inner critic from the perspective of your grounded adult self. So considering, what is it you would say to the critic from this grounded place, based on all your experiences this far up until now with the critic? Tell the critic how it's impacted your life, how it's holding you back, how you would like things to be different, what boundaries you'd like to put in place, the kind of relationship you'd like to have. So this is a very different place to communicate from than, say, when you're in your inner child and you might be reacting to the critic. It's actually about really asserting your wishes and your boundaries, towards the inner critic. And I feel like this establishes a really stable ground from which then to continue working with the inner critic. And the unsent letter doesn't allow for a two-way interaction. It's just one point of view speaking. Later on, the journal dialogue is when you have the opportunity to speak from both sides, and that is really fascinating also. But as a starting point, I wanted to share these two exercises.
Really, really rich. And if we will have a separate file where we will record this practice, so you can actually journal along and do this practice when your inner critic shows up. If you want to receive that, you can reach out to Roshnii or to me, and we will happily send it to you. And these two exercises are, so to speak, the foundation to entering into a dialogue, which Roshnii facilitates in regular workshops where it's all about journaling with the inner critic. And you will have one workshop coming up soon after this episode is released, I guess.
Yes, that's right. I do have a workshop coming up. It's scheduled for the 19th of February. And I run this workshop on a regular basis, so there'll be opportunities to enroll in the future as well if this month doesn't work out. And it's I call it a journal date with the inner critic. So it's about getting intimate with this character in a way that hopefully leaves you feeling much lighter and more empowered. I actually had a recent participant said that she literally was giggling to herself in the process, which was really surprising to her, that she could, having come in feeling quite anxious, about this interaction, she actually left laughing. So that was a really great bit of feedback.
Oh, definitely. Yeah, so much is possible in a date, and it's like a relationship. It's something that you cultivate over time. So it's good to have a fixed date and do that over and over and over again. So I will definitely link to where people can sign up for that. For right now, would you like to maybe just talk us through how these two journaling exercises would go? And then people can, if they want to have the journal along practice, they can reach out to us.
Sure, yeah. So for the first exercise, with most of the journaling exercises I facilitate, actually, I usually invite the participant to close their eyes, or go inside for a while and do a kind of entrance meditation to get in touch with the topic and focus, withdraw from the distractions outside. So in the entrance meditation for the first exercise, after some breathing, I would simply invite you to imagine, either in a visual sense or a felt sense, this grounded adult self, and imagine what she looks like, her physical appearance, the expression on her face, her posture, how she moves, how she interacts with the world, and then to focus on her emotional sphere, let's say. So how she how you feel in the presence of her energy, so the emotions that she brings up in you, and also the energetic field. So just really just becoming more and more familiar with this aspect of yourself, this grounded adult, everything that she represents, and the impact that she has on you when you're around her. So whatever comes up, just allow those feelings, images, words to flow freely. And then take some time. I usually suggest for this exercise 7 minutes. So set a timer so you don't have to think about it. And just write like a written portrait of this aspect of yourself, this grounded adult. So we call this, as I said, a character sketch. So just describing anything that came up about this persona and anything that comes up in the process of writing. And at the end of writing, I usually invite the participants to read back through what they've written and write a short reflection, about the impression that the writing has left on them, or the experience of writing it. So a statement like, when I read this, I feel, or I understand, or I notice, or I'm surprised by, some kind of short reflection statement. And then for the second exercise, again, you can do a short entrance meditation to first ground yourself in this adult self. So really feeling all those qualities that you recognized in her or acknowledged that are part of that part of yourself, to really just feel yourself embodying those. So feeling yourself grounding in that adult self. And once you feel established in that and you feel ready to, you can then write a letter to your inner critic. So again, inside the entrance meditation, you might imagine your inner critic in some shape or form, or whatever form it presents itself to you in that moment. And just start thinking about what it is you'd like to communicate to the inner critic, as I've referred to before, how it's impacted you, what you'd like to be different, the boundaries you'd like to set, and so on. Knowing that you can write anything you want and there will be no repercussions, no negative feedback. It's just a one-way communication. And then you can set a timer again if you want to. I usually suggest 10 minutes for this, and write your letter to the inner critic from your grounded adult self, expressing anything and everything that you want to say in that moment. And it's an exercise you can come back to at any time, at any point. If you feel like you've got feelings you want to vent, or there's been an incident where the inner critic has got very activated and you want to kind of recalibrate, the boundaries, or, communicate something, you can always come back to these, or the unsent letter exercise, whenever it serves you.
Yeah. That sounds so powerful, and I'm excited for everyone watching, listening right now to start diving into this, into befriending their inner critic. I hope this is going to be a valuable resource for you. As I shared, the practice itself, we will provide that in a separate file so you can journal along. So thank you, Roshnii, so much for bringing this powerful exercise to us today.
Thanks, Lisa.
And see each other in your next workshop.
Yeah.
Have a good day.
Thanks, you too.